play a key role in enabling consumers and consumers that up to now they were not active at all, for instance household consumers, in an aggregated manner to become, let's say, more active. So what we believe and what we try to reflect in the winter package is that demand side flexibility will be one of the key enablers in order to integrate this high amount of renewable generation. But it will also provide, as I said before, a tool to system operators, to TSOs, to DSOs, to more efficiently manage their grid and also address new challenges. In the winter package, we propose to integrate elements in the European framework, which we believe that they will also facilitate new business models and new actors to enter the energy sector. And of course, to support the integration of new technologies in our energy system. As you may already know, one of the key elements of the smart grid that we already try to promote already from the previous from the third package, the 2009 energy electricity and gas directive, is of course smart metering systems. We, according to our assessment, 19 member states are already implemented the smart metering system, like for instance Italy, Finland, they have already implemented the smart metering system, but also other member states will go ahead. And we project that around 60% of consumers will have a smart meter up to 2020, and up to 2022, around 70% of the European consumers, electricity consumers, will have a smart meter. You imagine passing from a conventional mechanical meter to a smart meter. What is the amount of data that will be generated and information to the consumer and of course other market actors, and especially energy service provider that will be able to provide services to the consumer, for instance demand response aggregators, energy efficiency services, etc. And therefore, we consider also that access to data and the framework, at least the high level, let's say, framework was required. So in this context, we also upgraded, let's say, what was already existing in the previous, in the third energy package, and try to add some new elements in order to set, first of all, some key principles that will work in all member states and that will comply, let's say, with all data management models that we see that are developing in different member states. And of course, what we also tried to add was to give more value, let's say, to the smart metering systems, and especially when it comes to information. We focused on the information that the smart metering systems will provide to the consumers and to energy service providers, and we insisted, let's say, on some specific functionality. So these investments will give value to consumers through information, and to provide this information in frequent enough, let's say, time periods and in a timely manner. Also another element that, let's say, links to this concept of smart consumer digitalization and new services is, of course, some, let's say, principles that we introduced when it comes to active consumers and demand response. We believe that consumers should be in position to take advantage of demand response and to take some value back from when responding either through price-based or explicit demand response and provide some services back to the market. What of course I didn't mention is that when it comes to data, all the proposed, let's say, framework comes under the context of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. So when some of the data are identified as personal data, and especially when this data come from a smart meter where they are identified as personal data, they have to be treated under the framework of the GDPR. When it comes to security, because it was mentioned before, just to briefly say that from our side, of course, we, from the energy, let's say, sector side, we fall again under a wider, let's say, framework, the NIS directive, Network and Information Systems Security Directive. So in this context also from our part, we are trying to provide a recommendation or to be sure that especially market actors that are involved in smart metering, they comply with the provisions of the directive and also standards that link to security of data. Last but not least, just to mention that in the context of the winter package, we also envisage, let's say, a framework for system operators, for distribution system operators, in order to ensure that DSOs are really neutral market facilitators, and their position is to facilitate new services. We believe that all the new services have to be implemented and developed under competitive terms from commercial actors. So in this context, distribution system operators should be really provide the connection to the system and be neutral. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Now I would leave the word to Nicola Melchiotti from Enel. Of course, he's active in many markets, in several European markets, and along almost all the value chain. So it's be interesting to hear from you about the different feeling about the value chain and markets on this.
So thank you. A lot has already been said. So I will try to focus on the value chain and on where the value stands in the system and how to extract it to complement the previous intervention. And to do it, I would like to spend a few seconds on how the system is evolving from what we saw in the past, in which the customer was at the very end of the value chain and he was passive. So it was very simple. We had very few large power plants, transmission lines, very well planned, monopolistic distribution lines, and then at the end the passive customer. So it was all about the capability to predict demand, which was very related with GDP and economic growth, and to execute projects, and that was all. So we had an easy life at that time. Nowadays it's very different. If we look at what we have today, I'm not talking about the future, what we see today, we see that more and more customers have their own solar panel, and the electricity doesn't flow vertically from the big gas plant to the transmission to the distribution to the customer, but flows from a retail solar plant maybe to the substation right outside your home, and then flows back to your neighbor. And we don't do anything in terms of transmission and generation. So electricity doesn't really flow in one direction. Today it's starting to flow in every direction at the same time. And it's very difficult to predict because, we don't see all solar panels that are installed in our countries. It's like free markets. Distribution networks are becoming smarter, so they react in real time. And sometimes you have the sun and sometimes you have not. So it's very difficult to predict demand, and you see more and more distributed generation. So the system is not a linear one anymore, it's a network in which instead of having very few, very large, very predictable and very stable building blocks, you have a lot of micro building blocks, like Legos, that you put together in a very flexible structure that changes all the time. Okay? It's a system that it's impossible to predict and it's impossible to manage, let's say, with a central approach. It's a system that needs to be self-managed, and more we see this. And digitalization is helping us somehow to do that, because instead of having human operators at the back of the system and trying to determine where the energy will need to flow, well, you have inverters and you have smart grids that do that in a real time. So it's really a change of mindset that we all need to have. The consumers and the customers are starting to have one in terms of empowerment, but also we as utility have to change our mindset and the way we do business. So it's not a central, very well planned, and we know what you're doing things. It's more about we have a very flexible system. It's changing all the time. How we manage this flexibility, it's like a living animal. And on top of that, it's happening something, and I say on top of that because it's really a coincidence that these two things are happening at the same time, which is the digitalization, in which different pieces, these building blocks, are starting to talk to each other. And this is not only true for electricity, but it's also true for transport, for example, cars. It's true for heating, for example, our thermal boilers. And it's true on many things. So all the pieces are starting to talk to each other. And they're starting to have the opportunity that we still do not seize completely, which is the opportunity to discuss about how they can create value to each other. For example, an electric vehicle, or let's say a vehicle, up until now, it has been a way in which each one of us could invest some capital, have a car at home, or maybe use an Uber, if you use these services I do, and that car used that to transport from one point to another. When you realize that your vehicle is connected to the grid, and maybe it's an electric vehicle, well, you realize that part of the investment is not really about moving one point to another, but you also are investing in a battery that is inside your vehicle. And that battery, when the vehicle is parked, which is 95% of the time, as we have in Europe, well, that is a virtual power plant that can be aggregated and offer services to the system. So basically, you're not just buying a car, you're buying a power plant. Today, you're not using that power plant at all, but starting today, you can do that and sell services to the grid. So talking about the value chain, the customer is not anymore at the end of the value chain. It's certainly at the beginning, generating electricity through its solar panels, but it's also moving to the center, in which you don't need to distribute electricity through a transmission grid. Maybe today I can give to the grid my electric vehicle and allow to balance the system with the battery that I have in my car. So all these kind of things are possible because we have these smart building blocks that can talk to each other, and we have a system through the new market design which is flexible and resilient enough to allow operators, which can be the customers, the aggregators, the utilities, or anyone else, to extract additional value from each of the pieces. So we are all players in this world that is very dynamic, and there's a lot to be done. So the system is getting incredibly complex. It's not top-down, it's very difficult to plan, and it's difficult to manage. But from this complexity, we can extract a lot of value. So the question is how and who can extract this value? This one. Second comment on visibility. Each one of us nowadays has very low visibility on how the system is working, because many of the dynamics are very local and happens in real time. So it's very difficult to see if at any point in time it will be my car that will get electricity from the grid, put back electricity from the grid, if there will be sun, if there will not be sun. So it's a system in real time. And the more we see the system, and the more we have access to data, and the more the devices can talk to each other, the more the value they can extract. So this is the value of flexibility. Each one of us as a consumer has some flexibility. We can either keep it for ourselves, meaning that I have a car, it's my own, I want to use it 100% of the time, I don't care about the system, it's just parked, I don't connect. 100% flexibility for myself, or I can sell back this flexibility to the system. And I say, I need my car 5% of the time, 95% is parked, I don't use that car in that time, so I offer the flexibility of my asset, which can be a thermal boiler, which can be a car, which can be, we talked about the washing machine, it's not a very flexible asset, but there are others. How can I sell back to the system this flexibility? And in order to do that, well, a centralized system is very inefficient. So we have a question today among utilities and among market operators about what system we might put in place, and the distribution system operator will play a central role in this, to allow all these devices to talk to each other and to close transactions. Blockchain, we mentioned before, it's a very important technology that is reaching the market to allow these devices to sell electricity to one another without the need of a centralized operator. So this is one technology we are exploring. It's not the only one. We will see in the future where the system goes. So it's a big opportunity to all of us, and I'm very happy to see that in the report you published, a lot of these things have been well analyzed. We don't believe that is the death of the power utility. Actually, we are very excited because there's a lot to do. The more the system is complex, the more you need someone who can harness this complexity and convert it to value that can be in part retained and in part given back to customers. Aggregation is key. The value we can extract from each piece and from each device is very small, and in order to manage the complexity of the system you need a certain scale. So aggregators will play a key role in making this happen. And also the engagement is very important. We've seen that up until now customers have been very passive, even in some countries in which they had the opportunity to open up and do something else. Well, the truth is that it's not that easy. Many times to become an active customer you need to invest either in your solar panels, or you need to invest time to understand the system. It's complex. You need to have guarantees, you need to have access, you need to put some time and effort. But aggregation will also solve this and will allow a better participation of the customers given the value that we can extract from the system. Since this is changing everything for all of us, starting from the customers to regulators to policymakers to utilities, it's more important today than it has ever been that we coordinate with each other and we agree on a common vision we want to implement, and we move together to put together what will be the electricity system of the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. As we showed before, the second focus was on transport. Actually, there was also something again on energy and that chapter. So I have the pleasure to introduce Antoine Aubert from Uber, speaking about, of course, what they are doing and your opinion on these issues.
Thanks, and many thanks for the invitation. We've heard a lot about the future consumer, the future energy network, and so I will not talk about transport, I will actually talk about mobility and how smart consumer can actually better move around cities, and how actually technology can help changing the way they are moving around and making it much more efficient. I've heard the word efficient in the mouths and the talking point of a lot of people, and I think that's what digital technology is really bringing into the mix. It's how can we make things far more efficient. I think the report is pointing at mobility as one of the most important human activities in cities. And I think it's easy to forget how important mobility is for us, and just look at it as like a day-to-day activity. But this is also central when it comes to social and economic aspects of our daily life. Actually, there's a Harvard University study that has defined that the single strongest factor to determine someone's economic life change is how long it takes to get to school or get to work. And so I think one of the speakers was talking about digital divide, and I think to some extent sometimes we have a mobility divide, and then the need to make sure that people can actually move around cities in particular extremely easily, and how we can actually facilitate that. I think we're facing a double problem or a challenge that is twofold at the moment when it comes to urban mobility. Is we have growing cities, so city keeps growing, and in Europe and worldwide, all cities are growing. And at the same time, when it comes to mobility and including mobilities in city, we are heavily relying on the use of private car, and all use of private car is actually pretty ineffective. You want to use electrical car that sits idle for 94 or 96% of the time. I think we want to make sure that they are moving all around all the time, and so that they are not parked. So I think all use of private car and the way we're using private car nowadays is a key challenge, and that's where digital technology can use, and especially to address some of the environmental issue or even public health issue that all use of private car is actually creating. So we believe that lots can be done using technology and making better use of existing asset and infrastructure to actually empower smart consumer or smart passenger that will look at alternative to use of private car or car ownership, and go for different type of option. And in doing that, we really believe that there's an opportunity to cut congestion, pollution, parking, improve access to transportation. When we're looking at the use of car, I think we should not blame it on the car itself. There's more than 1 billion cars today in the world. So the problem is not so much the car itself, but it's how we're actually using the car individually. On average, the car occupancy is 1.2%, which is a pretty inefficient use of what is most of the time our second most important asset. So if you own your house, your car is your second most important asset, and you're making and putting lots of money in something that is not necessarily generating lots of value. As I said, this use of individual car is coming at a cost for the consumer, but also is coming at a public cost in terms of like congestion, generating pollution, and 12% of all global CO2 emission coming from car, or in terms of us losing a lot of time in traffic. If you look at Belgium, and you can hear the traffic is starting now in the street on Rue de la Loi, but if you look at Belgium, people are losing 2 working weeks per year in congestion, and the cost of congestion, but it's pretty much in every country around the world, is estimated in between 1 and 2% of GDP. When we're looking at the future of urban mobility and how smart consumer can actually better move around, I think public transport is definitely one of the major parts of the solution. And so we truly believe that there is a need to promote and work with public transport, and I will talk a bit about that. But even in cities that have extremely dense public transport infrastructure, like Paris, the car is still dominating the city. And so, again, you take Paris as an example that has a very good transport and public transport system, and you still have like 15 million single car journeys that are taking place every day. One of the reasons is that public transport cannot, has to stop somewhere, and it cannot go at the door of each and every of us, and especially in lower income neighborhoods that are not necessarily well deserved. So this is where we're seeing like a tremendous opportunity in contributing to the creation of reliable and affordable service that can constitute a credible alternative to car ownership. That's where we see smart consumer making increasingly sophisticated use of different mobility services, and how they are actually combining different type of mobility option, including ride sharing, to actually move around the city. So we've been starting for quite some time looking at the data and how people are actually using our services. And what we realize is more and more people are actually using our service to connect to the public transport infrastructure. So in this city, already 30% of the rides of Uber are from or towards a metro or train station. And this is a trend that we are witnessing in pretty much all the cities globally, but that is very clear in London or Paris. We actually have a very good case study to demonstrate this complementarity. That is the London night tube. So I think when London started its night tube, everybody believed that Uber will lose a ride, and there will be less ride on the Uber service because hipster and people going late at night will go back by tube instead of using a Uber. And actually what happened is exactly the other way around. We've seen an increase in the number of rides, with people actually, less ride in the center town, with people using the tube to actually go back to their neighborhood, and then taking Uber to go back to their place. So that's the typical example. And so in most of the night tube station most of the station served by the night tube, we've seen 60% increase in the number of rides, and in some of them up to 300%. So users that are becoming extremely savvy and clever at using different type of mobility option to actually move around city and complementing public transport with brand new services. We do believe that kind of new use are central to trigger what we believe is a much needed behavioral shift towards shared mobility. So giving away private car and deciding to go for other mobility option. That's something we're very keen on working on and developing. So you may have heard or you will see in the future lots of partnership with public transport operators. So that's one of the things we're developing. One of the things we're developing as well is providing you with information in the app on how you can connect with public transport. So if your destination is a tube station, we will actually show you in real time the time of the tube leaving this station. So we've started developing that in the US, and it's already in 50 cities. And obviously that's something we can further develop. Now, one last thing I'd like to mention, and that was already actually mentioned in the presentation, is dynamic pricing and the system we're using to actually make the system even more effective and make sure that everybody and each and every user will always have a ride within minutes, which is pretty important for our model. And that is actually pretty well explained in the model, in your report, sorry. So I'll just give you a quick hint, and I'll invite you to have a look at the report if you want to better understand how it works. But Uber is normally pretty much, the system is calculating a recommended fare that is based on distance or time of the ride. And so we're providing the user with an estimate of the fare before he or she is taking a ride, so that he has full information on how much the ride is gonna cost. However, the number of drivers offering their service in a certain area and the number of users requiring their service can change pretty much over time. And sometimes we see a mismatch in between the number of people that are actually willing to get a ride and the number of drivers actually applying this service. So what we're doing, and that's a model that is in place since we're starting, is we're applying a dynamic pricing model. So for what we will do is we would apply a multiplier on the price of the fare that will increase the price for the user, and will inform the drivers that in a given area there is a higher multiplier that is applying. And so the system has a double effect. It encourages the driver to actually come and go to a certain area to serve the user. In certain cases, when the price is too high, it can incentivize the rider to wait up until the fare is actually going down, or seek an alternative. And so these two effects working together bring supply and demand back into balance, and fare back to normal. So we'll just conclude by saying that we believe that technological and business innovation, like dynamic pricing, can really help improving urban mobility to the benefit of users, drivers, and cities. And that's pretty much what we're going to continue working on in the coming months and years. Many thanks.
Thanks, Antoine. And